The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 391. Kiran let go of Lilian and looked at the harp curiously. He went over to put his hand on it and felt a sudden tremendous force flowing into his body. The force did not attack him but filled him with love instead. A perfect image appeared in his mind. Towering mountains, flowing rivers, and lush trees. A man and a woman were sitting across from each other beside a cottage, playing the harp. The music was gentle and soft, and it felt like the entire world had stopped. It was a world free from worries. Like a goddess, the woman was beautiful and serene, making him want to embrace her and spend eternity with her. The man was cool and natural. His gaze was affectionate, as if he had finally found his dream woman after searching for 1,000 years. The images were beautiful and constantly changing. He even pictured the couple as him and Lilian. Why was that happening? Kiran felt his heart trembling. His face was filled with shock as he turned to look at Lilian. She was already standing up and wiping the blood from her mouth. Kiran removed his hand from the harp and looked at Lilian. What's going on? It's nothing. Lilian glanced at him bitterly without explanation. Kiran knew that both the harp and Lilian were hiding something. What on earth is going on? Leave, Lilian scolded. Kiran's face turned frigid. How many times was she going to ask him to leave? He would have gotten angry if it were anyone else, but he held it in since it was Lilian. Not only did she look after Snow for him, but she also gave up on their engagement. Fine, Kiran said. I don't want to ever see you again. Lilian's tone was cruel. Neither do I. Kiran felt his ego being bruised, so he responded cruelly too. I don't care whether you die, Lilian said without emotion. I'll sleep with Snow when I get back and I'll go develop Dragon's Mount, Kiran said before leaving. Stop, Lilian shouted sharply. Kiran did not turn back. What's it to you that I sleep with my wife? I don't care, but I have to warn you, Lilian said. What? Kiran asked. If you sleep with Snow, you should be prepared for a sudden death, Lilian said angrily with a trace of humiliation. Do I look like a fool to you? Kiran sneered. It's up to you how you want to take my warning, but if you want to die, you can sleep with Snow. What if I sleep with other women? You'll die too, Lilian said the same thing. What if I sleep with you? Kiran said suddenly. You'll die, especially if you sleep with me. A murderous aura was radiating off her. So, I can't sleep with anyone? Kiran sneered. I've warned you, but whether you want to listen is up to you. I don't care, Lilian said without emotion. You're not supposed to care if I sleep with my wife anyway. That's my business, not yours. Kiran left after being triggered. Don't mess with Dragon's Mount, Lilian added. That's the York family's business. You don't have to worry about it, Kiran refused. I must worry about this matter? Lilian became serious. Why? Kiran turned around with a newfound anger behind his gaze. Because I'm the mistress of the York family. Lilian stared at Kiran without backing down. Mistress of the York family? Kiran's face was livid. I won't sleep with you, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm the mistress of the York family. Nothing will change that. Not even if you sleep with Snow, Lilian said gravely. Kiran was enraged. You're out of your mind? Did you really think that the marriage contract would work? Snow is my wife, so she's the mistress of the York family. Kiran paused and looked at her. Lilian stared back at him without a word. She's the only mistress of the York family! Kiran emphasized Snow's status with an authoritative air about him. Ha! Lilian chuckled and looked at Kiran. If you think you can anger me with that, then you're wrong. Why? Kiran was taken aback. I never wanted to be with you. Great. In my eyes, you're not worthy of me at all. I despise you, Lilian brutally ridiculed him. Kiran's ego had been bruised, and his face displayed a deep hatred. As for the mistress of the York family, it's not up to you to decide. Even if you're married to Snow, it doesn't change the fact that I'm the mistress. You're insane, Kiran retorted. I'm telling you, whether it be Snow or any other woman, all you can do is look at them. You can't even sneak a taste. Ah, Kiran laughed. Do you really think that I'm an idiot? I wasn't aware that such a thing existed in this world. You can choose to believe it or not, but I'm only warning you. Don't you think it's strange how both of us were vomiting blood when the harp played? Kiran's face fell. Why is that? Figure it out yourself. I have another thing for you to figure out. What? Why do you know women who know how to use black magic like Serena and Yvonne? Does Yvonne really know how to use black magic? Kiran did not expect Lilian to know. Stop pretending when you already know. You should think about why you're not poisoned yet. I'm a doctor. Black magic can't hurt me. I hope you're right. Lilian paused and continued. I think you should ask Yvonne if there's any poison in your body. How could there be poison in me? Impossible. I know my body. Kiran was stunned. "Idiot! Get out of here!" Lilian got mad. Kiran was puzzled. He was curious to know whether there was poison in his body, so he left without a word to go look for Yvonne. Lilian watched his back in anger. Kiran ignored her and went downstairs. In the parking lot, a man stood next to Snow's car. It was Thor. He looked the same as when he kidnapped Serena. However, Snow was not as careful as Serena. She thought he had something to say to her, so she lowered the car window. Just as she was about to speak, she fell unconscious and was taken away by him. Kiran went downstairs, feeling irritated. He became anxious when he saw the empty car in the parking lot without Snow in it. Just then, his phone rang. It was Lindsay. Chapter 392. Kiran knew why she was calling, so he answered the phone. "Lindsay, do you have a death wish?" "Kiran, if you're such a man, why don't you come to the hotel and kill me right now?" After she said that, she slammed the phone. Kiran's eyes were furious. Did she think that he would not kill her just because she was a woman? He immediately got into the car and rushed to Bayville Hotel. In Kiran's eyes, not even the king could lay a finger on Snow. In Lindsay's room at Bayville Hotel, with a smug smile, she looked at the tied-up Snow as if she were a god who controlled destiny. "Don't be nervous. I won't hurt you. I just want you to see what kind of man Kiran really is." Snow was calm, but her face looked furious. "You're wasting your efforts. Others have tried this before." Lilian had used their engagement to test Kiran before, and Kiran made it clear that he only loved Snow, so Lindsay's efforts were useless. "It may not work for others, but I have to try it myself." After saying that, Lindsay immediately asked Thor to gag Snow and put her on the bed. After doing that, Thor left the room. Lindsay played some soothing music and removed her clothes, changing into new ones in front of the dressing table. Lindsay put on brown silk pajamas but felt it was not revealing enough. In fact, it looked quite modest. She began to look for other clothes in her closet. When she bent over to look for clothes, her tight body showed no traces of excess fat whatsoever. Lindsay was satisfied with how she looked. As the eldest daughter of the Ludwig family, she had always controlled others. She had never had anyone control her before. Not only did she not have the power to control Kiran, but she had even humiliated herself before him. She could not bear such humiliation, so she wanted to take revenge. In the end, she chose a revealing nightgown. She looked in the mirror, wearing the sexy nightgown. Although it was not as sexy and hot as the maid costume Kiran put on her, it was more feminine. She looked at herself in the mirror and smiled, thinking, "Kiran, when you're here, I'll make you grovel at my feet like a dog." She was confident and looking forward to it. She sat on the sofa comfortably. Her left leg was placed on top of her right leg, and her smooth calves glowed under the light like crystals. Kiran arrived at Bayville Hotel and rushed up to Lindsay's room. The door of Yvonne's room opened suddenly, and she waved at him without saying anything. Although Kiran was anxious, he noticed she had something to say, so he asked, "What's wrong?" Snow was brought into Lindsay's room by the man who kidnapped Serena. "I don't think she's in danger," Yvonne whispered with a pale face. Kiran calmed down significantly. "Thank you." Yvonne shook her head. "Go." After saying that, she was about to close the door and head back in. "Have you been watching her?" Kiran asked suddenly. "I thought she might be a threat to you, so I started observing her. I don't have any other intentions," Yvonne explained. Kiran nodded. "I got it." Yvonne nodded as she lost herself in his eyes. Kiran could not understand Yvonne. What was she trying to do to him? Why was the Quinn family related to the Saintess of Maui? He shook off his thoughts and walked to Lindsay's door. He noticed that the door was not closed and there was a gap. That meant they were not afraid of his arrival. Kiran was frustrated with Lindsay. Was she not aware of his power? Was she not scared of him? How could she ignore him like this? Kiran opened the door and saw Lindsay sitting on the couch. Her feet were like a work of art, and her toes were neatly aligned. Her toenails naturally had a pinkish hue, as if a light layer of nail polish was on them. It exuded a seductive charm that made one unable to resist the urge to touch them. Her swaying feet seemed to greet Kiran, tempting him to come over and kneel before her so she could place her foot on his face. Kiran quickly looked around for Snow. Lindsay was surprised to see how calm he was. She had two characteristics about her that many men and women would go crazy for. Firstly, although she had never been with a man, her womanly charm could make countless men crazy about her. Secondly were her feet. Her feet were always wrapped up in socks for fear of being seen. Her feet were simply exquisite. They were capable of captivating women and arousing primal instincts in men. The same pair of feet were placed before Kiran, but he showed no interest. He turned a blind eye as if they were non-existent. She was humiliated, and her self-esteem was bruised. "What are you looking for, Kiran?" Lindsay asked, suppressing her anger. My wife, Kiran said angrily. My men have killed your wife, Lindsay said angrily. If anything happened to my wife, I'd make your life a living hell, Kiran responded coldly. What kind of hell? Lindsay asked angrily. You can use your imagination. You won't be disappointed, Kiran sneered. Disappointed? I'm not going to disappoint you too. Lindsay stood up from the sofa and looked at Kiran. Why don't you touch me? You? Kiran asked. Yes, ha. Kiran scoffed. What are you laughing at? Lindsay asked. Slap, chapter 393. Ah, Lindsay screamed. Plop! Her entire body was thrown onto the sofa, but she fell face first. Kiran hit her hard. Not only did Lindsay hurt physically, but mentally too. Her feet never failed to entice men. Last time, Kiran grabbed her feet and pricked her with a needle, causing her to lose her dignity as a woman. She thought that Kiran did not get a good look at her feet, so she tempted him with them today, hoping to seduce him. Unexpectedly, he did not budge. He even slapped her. Kiran, it's on! Lindsay pushed herself off the sofa and jumped up to fight him. You want to fight me? Kiran sneered. A needle was already in his hand. He shook it before Lindsay and said, On what basis? When Lindsay saw the needle in his hand, she trembled like her body had been drained of its energy. That sensation came again out of nowhere. Kiran saw her expression and said ruthlessly, Lindsay, how could you fight me when I can do this to you just by taking out the needle? Lindsay glared at him fiercely. She wanted to speak but did not know how to refute him. Kiran shook the needle. Lindsay, I don't want to kill you right now because I don't want to dirty my hands, but you're pushing me to my limits by kidnapping Serena and Snow. I think I've been too kind. Come at me then! Lindsay sat up straight and shouted. You want me to come at you? Kiran sneered and shook his head. I didn't think you asked me here because of that. Are you that impatient? Shut up! Lindsay threw a pillow at him angrily. Kiran smiled happily. He stared at Lindsay and said, You have an option! What is it? Lindsay asked. Kiran turned his phone on and clicked on the video recording mode, pointing the camera at Lindsay. I want to keep a precious memory of you. Memory? What memory? Lindsay looked at Kiran confusedly. A memory of you pleasuring yourself. Kiran smiled and put away his phone. I'll fight you. Lindsay stood up and rushed toward him. Kiran dodged and held her right arm with his left hand. With a slight push, Lindsay spun in circles. There was another crisp slapping sound and Lindsay flew back onto the sofa, face first again. Lindsay, I don't want to waste time, so you better hurry up. Kiran sounded cold. Over my dead body. Lindsay was livid. Since you're asking for it, I guess I'll make it easy for you. Kiran shook the needle. He walked toward Lindsay with the needle. Lindsay turned pale with fright. She could not afford to lose to him, so she reached out her hands. No, don't. You don't have a choice, Kiran said naturally. I'll record it myself. Lindsay was terrified of him. She dared not imagine the horror of going against him. You better record it nicely. If I'm not satisfied, you'll have to do it all over again. Kiran breathed a sigh of relief. He did not want to see it with his own eyes, so he walked toward the back room. Lindsay sat on the sofa, seething with anger. She wanted to kill him, but she did not have the ability to. She wanted to call Windsor and Thor, but even they might not be able to kill him. She thought of jumping down and committing suicide, but she would only be doing him a favor. He had already humiliated her with the silver needle once, so what was the big deal if he saw her like that again? Sooner or later, she would get her revenge. Kiran went into the back room and saw Snow tied up and gagged. His anger subsided when he saw her safe. He went to untie her. Snow immediately pulled the gag cloth out, rushed over to him and cried, Honey! Kiran hugged her. I'm sorry, honey. It's okay, Snow looked at the door halfway through her sentence and said, Is it true? Kiran nodded. Do you think she has a choice? Kiran was calm. She deserved it. They were adults, so they had to pay for their mistakes, especially for a woman like Lindsay. If he did not defeat her mentally, extracting more information from her would be impossible. Then, he would never escape from this deadlock. Let's go! Kiran put his arms around her and walked out of the room. Chapter 394. The blush on Lindsay's face had yet to fade when Kiran walked out. To her dismay, he barely spared her a glance, which dealt a huge blow to her self-esteem. Lindsay, I'll give you a chance to return. Kiran regarded her disappointed face. What chance? 200 billion! Kiran raised two fingers, grinning. In your dreams, Lindsay shouted, then added indignantly, I don't have control over that much money. Then invest whatever amount is under your control and give me your earnings. Kiran smiled. If you give me 200 billion, I'll even give you my phone, Kiran smirked. Lindsay was beside herself with rage at the way she was being treated like a money tree. Did he think she was a babe in the woods like his wife? Just you wait. She gritted her teeth and closed her eyes. Smiling, Kiran approached her and gazed down at her. There was no denying that she was beautiful, and her mature charm radiated naturally from her like warm afternoon sunshine. However, she was not his cup of tea. Sensing his gaze, she hurriedly opened her eyes. When she found him right in front of her, she was overcome with a sudden desire for him to pin her beneath his body and give her a sense of security, or maybe kiss her so that she could feel his warmth. Lindsay Ludwig, I don't want to see anyone important to me getting kidnapped. Tell that guy who kidnapped Snow and Serena to get out of Bayville at once. If I see him again, I'll send him to the afterlife right away. Under the serenity of his tone was roiling murderousness. Next time, I'll tell him to kill them right away, Lindsay scoffed. Then you'll suffer a fate worse than death. Kiran patted her on the cheek. Lindsay believed she had nothing left to fear now that she had submitted that obscene video of herself to him, so she sneered. Whatever. You've seen my body anyway, so it doesn't matter if other people see it too. I'll just say that you toyed with my feelings. Unfazed by her words, Kiran took out a silver needle. Lindsay flinched. Next time, I won't let you feel so good anymore, Kiran warned. Then, what will you do? Kiran patted her fair cheek. I'm sure you wouldn't want this part of you to be ruined, right? You... A chill ran down Lindsay's spine. It was indeed more frightening than being filmed or pricked on the feet by the silver needle. Remember what I said. If you can get me 200 billion, you'll be fine. Kiran straightened up and beamed at her without a hint of anger in his eyes. However, all she could feel was pure, soul-deep terror and uncontrollable trepidation. Smiling, Kiran left with Snow in his arms. Lindsay slumped on the couch, her body drained and cold. Her feelings toward Kiran were starting to become muddled. All of a sudden, she realized she could not hate him. Kiran York, I will get my revenge. After a few minutes, she finally snarled with all the bitterness she could muster. She scrambled up and called Thor to tell him to leave Bayville at once. She knew very well how brutal Kiran could be. Fortunately, she was a woman, and he seemed to want her. Did he? Although she yearned for it to be true, she could not bring herself to believe it. Eventually, she curled up on the couch anxiously. Kiran and Snow left Bayville Hotel and went straight to Xander Corporation. Snow finally calmed down after drinking a glass of warm water in her office. She glanced at Kiran. It's all my fault. Kiran pressed a finger to her fiery red lips. The heat of his hand filled her body with warmth and happiness. Notify the employees that the company will officially restart operations tomorrow and enter the medicine market, Kiran told her. We're restarting operations? Tears of joy welled up in Snow's eyes. He nodded. Yes. From now on, Xander Corporation will set sail again. Kiran! Snow jumped up, threw her arms around him, and leaned in to kiss him. Kiran's eyes shone with joy as he relished the softness of his wife's body. However, he could not help thinking about Lilian's reminder. Was it true that he could not sleep with other women? Catching sight of the magical harp out of the corner of his eye, he hesitated for a moment before whispering a few words into Snow's ear. Snow blushed, but she nodded and said softly, "Give me a second." She spun around and ran into the bathroom. Kiran fixed his stare on the harp. He refused to believe it, and he wanted to challenge this reality. 5 minutes later, the door opened and Snow walked out. When Kiran saw her, his eyes lit up with delight. She had changed into a black, translucent, sleeveless nightgown. At this moment, she was just like the goddess of beauty descended from the heavens. Twang! Suddenly, the harp produced a dull sound. Kiran's mind was almost controlled by impulse when a tremor rippled through him, followed by an inexplicable wave of sorrow and heartache. Snow calmed down and turned to look at the harp, but Kiran swept her into his arms and continued to kiss her. He refused to believe that a mere harp could determine his happiness, so he wanted to challenge fate. Thinking he was serious about embracing her, Snow did not stop him and was ready to yield herself to him. Twang! The harp made another agitated sound. The energy in Kiran's abdomen began to fluctuate violently. He tried to suppress it, but it was no longer possible. Blarg! He spat out a mouthful of blood. Fortunately, he pulled away from Snow in time and prevented the blood from spattering over her. Still, it had alarmed her, and she reached out to steady him with a horrified expression. Honey, are you all right? Kiran clutched his heaving chest, frustration surging in him, his eyes blazing with fury. Was there really something wrong? Enraged, he raised his fist and rushed toward the harp, intending to smash it. Just then, his phone vibrated frantically in his pocket. Chapter 395. Kiran stopped and took out his cell phone. When he saw it was from Lilian, all his rage erupted like a volcano, spewing its lava toward her on the other end. Why? Just why? If you want to die, do it on your own. Don't take me with you, Lilian snarled just as furiously. You... Kiran was taken aback that she knew. Kiran York, if you want to die, you can jump off a building into the sea or onto the railway tracks. Anything except sleep with a woman. I don't want to die with you. With a click, Lilian hung up in a fit of anger. She slumped into her seat, her face pale, blood trickling from the corners of her mouth. She slammed a fist onto the floor. Damn you, Kiran York! Are you really going to make me die together with you? Kiran gazed at the dimmed screen of his phone, his mother's demand for the Xander family to break off the engagement, and Lilian's words running through his mind. Was it really impossible for him to sever ties with her? Fuck! He hurled his phone to the floor in a sudden outburst of fury. Snow was startled and stared at him in concern. Honey, what's wrong? The thought that he could not touch the woman he so deeply loved filled him with remorse, and he wrapped his arms around her. Honey, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Snow was distressed to see him so upset, like a helpless child, and she hugged him back. Honey, what's the matter? Kiran only embraced her tightly without saying a word. Snow was distraught, but all she could do was hold him and provide him care and comfort. When he let go of her a few minutes later, he was already visibly calmer. Honey, I'll leave it to you to study the company's operations for tomorrow. I need to head out for a bit. Although Snow was worried about him, she nodded in agreement. Are you okay? I'm fine. Kiran felt guilty. He wished he could tell his wife that as long as he did not touch her, he would be fine. However, he could never say it out loud. He caressed her cheek sorrowfully, then spun around and left. The moment he walked out of the room, he slapped himself in the face. The abrupt pain made him realize that he had become too immersed in love. It reminded him that his family's revenge was his priority. The slap was so hard that blood seeped from the corners of his mouth. Snow's heart hurt as she watched him from the doorway. She longed to hold him in her arms and make him feel her love. Kiran went downstairs and saw that Onyx's gang was still in the middle of training. He beckoned to Onyx. The man ran up to him at once. Yes, Mr. Kiran? I need you to get a hold of construction vehicles like demolition machines, excavators, and tipper trucks. The more, the better, Kiran ordered. Yes, sir. Onyx immediately obeyed and left to carry out his instructions without asking why. Kiran looked in the direction of Dragon's Mount. He had decided to demolish the abandoned buildings up there and build a cemetery for the York family. Now that Xander Corporation was going to set sail, the York family would also embark on its road to revenge again. As for the research on Dragon's Mount and the secret records, he was no longer interested. There was surely someone more interested than him, and when they obtained the answer or discovered a problem, that would be the best time for him to follow up. He had more information in his hand, after all. Having figured all that out, he was finally much calmer. Remembering what Lilian had said about Yvonne, he drove straight to Bayville Hotel. He wanted to ask her in person who the hell she was. Even though the three big families had been lying low recently, he had not forgotten his hatred. He arrived at the parking lot of Bayville Hotel. He had just gotten out of his car and started toward the hotel when he suddenly heard the roar of an engine behind him. He jumped to the side in a display of quick reflexes, dodging the car successfully. However, instead of driving away, it braked suddenly, reversed, and barreled toward him again. When he recognized that it was Lindsay in the driver's seat, he almost exploded with rage. He raised his hand to slam it down on the car. However, she stepped on the accelerator and sped off. Bitch, Kiran cursed as he watched the car disappear into the distance. Lindsay responded even more savagely by flipping him off. She loathed this man so much that she swore to toy with him until he could take it no more. No, she would not kill him, but toy with him. She was determined to get back at him for humiliating her, a maiden. In fact, she was starting to envision torturing him in bed like a psychopath. When she had hurtled toward him just now, she had known that she could not kill him. She had only done it to get under his skin. Kiran was, indeed, very much aggravated. It was exasperating to have to deal with this madwoman when he was already bogged down in doubt. He headed upstairs and went to Yvonne's room. Yvonne was sitting in her office, reviewing a stack of documents on her desk. She was dressed in a white parka, her hair pulled up to expose her fair neck. She looked fresh and crisp, and she exuded a delicate and aloof womanly charm. When she saw Kiran enter, a surprised expression crossed her face before being swiftly replaced with joy. Kiran! She stood up and stepped out from behind her desk. Only then did Kiran discover that she was wearing black stockings and heels, forming a typical black and white combination. Despite the stark color contrast, it did not take away the sultriness of her long legs and high heels. She was already tall, but her shoes and outfit made her appear even more willowy and lovely. When she noticed Kiran staring at her, a blush emerged on her pale face. She glanced down at her stockings, pressing her legs together nervously, and said shyly, "These are thick stockings. I couldn't wear them in the past, but after you cured me, I can finally wear them secretly in the office." After saying that, she quickly dropped his head in embarrassment. Although Kiran approved of her beauty and sexy outfit, he was not in the mood to admire her now. "I need to talk to you about something." Yvonne nodded. "I know. You know why I came?" Kiran was curious. She shook her head. "What I meant was, you wouldn't come to me if you didn't have important business." Kiran picked up on the petulance and unhappiness in her tone, but he merely nodded. "Well, I do have important business. What is it?" Yvonne asked evenly, regarding him with a hint of ambivalence in her eyes. Kiran gazed at the frail Warren in front of him. She was the embodiment of the delicate and sickly trope, but he could not figure out whether she was good or evil. Staring at her, he asked gravely, "Why did you lie to me?" Chapter 396. Yvonne gave a start and whipped her head around to him, her eyes filled with panic. Obviously, she had no idea how he had found out. Kiran gazed at her without another word, but his face spoke volumes about his curiosity. Yvonne lowered her head silently and said nothing, but her bloodless complexion made her seem as if she was going to collapse lifelessly at any second. She seemed extremely terrified. Kiran could not read her mind at all. However, he did not press her for an immediate answer. He only stared at her, waiting for her explanation. After 2 minutes, she looked at him with tear-filled eyes and asked softly, "Hey, are you going to kill me?" Kiran knew how to manipulate her, but for some reason, his heart softened at the sight of her tears, and he could not bring himself to hurt her. To him, killing someone was a piece of cake. Nevertheless, Yvonne's tears conveyed her distress, despondency, as well as sincerity. That was a woman's sincerity to a man. "Tell me why." He did not give her a direct answer. Yvonne seemed dismayed. She blinked and tears instantly rolled down her face, but instead of wiping them away, she fixed Kiran with a solemn look. "I was the one who killed Zachary and Wendell. The Golden Dragon belongs to me, not the School of Medicine. They're just helping me keep it for black magic purposes," she finally confessed. Kiran was astounded, and even more heartbroken. He was upset and enraged at her deception. He had thought of her as a woman with a pitiful fate, and he had intended to help or even spare her, but... He glowered at her wordlessly. Yvonne continued, "But I meant what I said about fasting for the York family for a month every year on Dragon's Mount." Kiran remained silent as he waited for her to go on, his heart in turmoil. "Kiran, whether you believe me or not, that's the truth. I'll just say one more thing." Yvonne was disheartened when he kept quiet. "What?" Kiran finally opened his mouth. "My heart lies with you and the York family, and I've never thought of doing anything to hurt you. If I ever betray you, I'll be struck by lightning. No, I'll be cursed by black magic and die." Yvonne's face was pale but determined as she damned herself. Kiran was overcome with shock. The Maui tribe practiced black magic and respected it immensely. For them, dying of a black magic curse was an oath that carried a lot of weight, so he was startled that Yvonne had cursed herself just to gain his trust. However, he did not respond to her. He refused to be deceived a second time. "Kiran, if you still don't believe me, you might as well kill me now." Yvonne took a step forward, placing herself less than 4 inches away from him, and gazed at him with misty eyes. A mixture of emotions seized Kiran's heart as he regarded the weeping woman in front of him. He took a step back. "I won't believe you." A sad, disappointed smile appeared on Yvonne's face. She murmured, "I knew you wouldn't believe me." Thud. Dejected, she slumped to the floor, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yvonne, I've already been very lenient with you." Kiran remained in place with his hands behind his back. "I know," she smiled bitterly. "Then why did you lie to me?" "I didn't mean to," she spoke a little more loudly. "You didn't?" Recalling the events on Dragon's Mount, Kiran scoffed. "Kiran, have you ever wondered why Serena's master helped your family, and why Serena's protecting the Xander family?" Yvonne stared at him miserably. "I don't know, and neither does she," Kiran said truthfully. "There's too much I can't tell you, but I can give you a warning." Yvonne suddenly grew serious. Kiran did not reply, but he was clearly waiting for her to continue. "The answer to that is what everyone's seeking." Yvonne looked at him steadily. "You've already been in the cave and understood the situation down there, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are more secrets that remain hidden from me and others. That's why everyone is studying the secret records. Also, Zachary may have been a liar, but he wasn't completely ignorant. He discovered clues about something he shouldn't know about. I was afraid he'd leak them, so I killed him. As for Wendell, he was the Ludwig family's dog, and a cunning one at that. Maybe you thought he was scared of you, but once he found a chance to escape, he wouldn't obey you anymore. Besides, he'd only give you trouble if he found out about Zachary. Kiran snickered in disbelief. You don't believe me? Yvonne was crestfallen. All of you are always coming up with convenient reasons. Do you take me for a fool? Kiran sneered. After tomorrow, the York family's abandoned property on Dragon's Mount will be demolished, and then I'll develop the area. You want to develop Dragon's Mount? Yvonne suddenly raised her voice. Kiran nodded. That's right. No one can stop me from developing Dragon's Mount. Kiran, can you calm down? Yvonne shouted, shooting to her feet. I'm just telling you the truth. I will develop Dragon's Mount, Kiran stressed. So, you've already decided? You're not going to change your mind? He nodded. Yes, very well. Suddenly, she took out a dagger from the desk drawer. Kiran, are you absolutely certain about developing Dragon's Mount? Kiran eyed the dagger in her hand. Thinking she was going to fight him to the death, he nodded even more firmly. Yeah. I know you won't listen to me no matter what I say, but I really don't want you to do it. She tried to persuade him again. I don't need you to meddle in my business. Yvonne inclined her head tearfully. I won't meddle, but I'm going to risk my life to stop you. You want to kill me? Kiran's face turned grim. Yvonne shook her head. Without warning, she raised the dagger and thrust it toward her chest. Her resolute expression, disappointed gaze, and unrelenting speed suddenly gave Kiran the feeling that something was off. However, he did not stop her. He believed that she was only putting on an act and would never kill herself for real. Party! Yvonne's dagger penetrated her body and went deep. Kiran's mind went blank. Was this woman serious about dying? He rushed forward and grabbed her wrist, preventing the dagger from plunging deeper. Nevertheless, her delicate body sank limply to the floor. She looked at Kiran and said weakly, Kiran, don't develop Dragon's Mount. Don't. Before she could finish, she fainted. Chapter 397. Kiran had never imagined that Yvonne would try to thwart him with suicide. He did not bother to ask her why as he hastily removed her clothes, took out a silver needle, and stopped the bleeding swiftly. However, his expression was grave. Yvonne had shown herself no mercy. Almost half of the dagger was inside her. Even though it was not long, it was still dangerous. Kiran could not understand why this woman would rather die than let him develop Dragon's Mount. He was infuriated. Lilian, Yvonne, Serena, these women seemed to be keeping many secrets from him, making him as aimless as a headless chicken. Why had the powerful York family been crushed overnight? Since his mother was alive, why didn't she avenge his father? Despite his inner turmoil, he quickly gave Yvonne first aid. After more than an hour, Yvonne's condition was finally stabilized. She had barely escaped death. Kiran picked up the phone and called the receptionist to come up. The puzzled receptionist went upstairs and knocked on the door. When she entered and saw Yvonne lying still on the blood-smeared floor like a dead person, she screamed and fell onto her rear in fright. Without wasting time explaining the situation, Kiran ordered, I need you to do 2 things for me. 1. Get someone to clean up this room. 2. Buy the medicines on this list and bring them back to me as soon as possible. He passed the list of medicines he had written out to her. Ashen-faced, the receptionist took it with trembling hands and bolted out of the room without even closing the door. Kiran gathered Yvonne into his arms and laid her on the bed in the inner room. He gazed at her pale face in confusion. It was strange that this woman would rather die than tell him the reason when he had not even asked the most crucial questions. Bemused, he walked out to clean the blood on his hands. At that moment, Lindsay returned. Finding the door open, she poked her head inside. She was immediately greeted with the sight of blood all over the floor, as well as on Kiran's body and hands. Ah! With a shriek, her legs gave out, and she fainted. Kiran was speechless from exasperation. Did this woman seriously get sick at the sight of blood? He strode over to her and tapped her on the body twice. Lindsay opened her eyes and saw the blood on his hands and body. Although her face was still as white as a sheet, she threw her arms around him. Are you injured? Where? As she spoke, she let go of him and started to take off his clothes to locate his wound. Kiran was stunned. Didn't this woman hate him to death? Why was she worried about him? Aren't you afraid of blood? You're going to die, a red-eyed Lindsay yelled, insistent on examining his wound. Kiran felt like he was about to be stripped naked, so he quickly got up and moved away from her. I'm not hurt. You're not, Lindsay exclaimed. The next second she flushed, mortified that she had shown him concern, and snapped, Why Why don't you just die? She spun on her heel and ran into the opposite room. She closed the door and leaned her back against it, then sank to the floor in agitation and embarrassment. She had had a fear of blood ever since she was a child. Every time she saw blood, she would lose her cool and even faint. Despite her phobia, she had thought Kiran was hurt when she had regained consciousness just now, which was why she had been so anxious. However, it had been a misunderstanding. She was utterly ashamed, for she had basically confessed her feelings outright to him by showing him concern. Gah, why don't you just die, jerk? She snarled, running her fingers through her hair in distress and frustration. When she had encountered Kiran in the parking lot, she had tried to run him over but failed. However, later on, she was dismayed to find she could not stop thinking about him, as well as the sensation of the silver needle pricking her feet. She was also starting to have perverted thoughts. She actually wanted Kiran to watch the video of her pleasuring herself, or even take her body. She realized her mind was becoming somewhat sick and twisted. She could hardly find the words to explain the state she was in. Her emotions were all jumbled up. She wanted to hate Kiran, but she could not. Her first reaction to seeing him covered in blood had been dizziness. After that, all she could feel was heart-aching worry for him. Could she have fallen in love with him? She shuddered at the possibility. She smacked herself lightly on the cheek, muttering, "Lindsay Ludwig, you can never ever fall in love with Kiran York. He's nothing but a horrible jerk." However, some words were like poison. The more she reminded herself not to fall for him, the more she could not contain her feelings, and the more she could not stop thinking about him. In fact, she was starting to hallucinate that he was right in front of her, and she even longed for him to pleasure her again with the silver needle. Ah! Suddenly, her body spasmed violently as if she had truly been stabbed in the foot by a silver needle. She collapsed on the floor, too weak to get up. She covered her face, unsure how to describe this embarrassing feeling. If this was just the effect of her imagination, what would happen in the future? She wanted to curl up and die. Meanwhile, Kiran had just finished cleaning up and was waiting for the receptionist to return with the medicines. Worried that Lindsay would scare herself to death after having barely recovered from her fainting spell, he walked over to her room and knocked on the door. Afraid that he would find her in her humiliating state, Lindsay shoved her hand into her mouth and bit down on it, not daring to make a sound and pretending that no one was there. However, her reluctance to open the door only alarmed Kiran more, so he pushed it open. "Ah!" Lindsay yelped as the door moved behind her. Before she knew it, Kiran had darted into the room. She scrambled to her feet, only to fall weakly toward him. Kiran hurriedly caught her. Her cheeks grew hotter. She let go of him and tried to regain her footing, but her legs were like jelly. Kiran stared at her curiously. Was her fear of blood that serious? Just when he was about to speak, he noticed the fiery blush on Lindsay's face. The truth instantly dawned on him, and he spat angrily. "Shameless bitch!" Lindsay was already abashed, and his reproach was like a knife to her gut. Remembering that he was the one who had inflicted this suffering on her, she exploded with rage. "Kiran York, you bastard!" Kiran ignored her and turned to leave. However, Lindsay grabbed onto him. "What do you want?" he asked coldly. "Kiran, I can't stand it anymore." Despite her mortification, she whined. "Can't stand what?" Kiran was baffled. Lindsay covered her face. I can't stand the feeling your silver needle gave me." Kiran was staggered. "Ew. Please. I'm begging you." To his shock, she threw her arms around him and tried to press herself to his chest. Furious, Kiran tried to shove her off. "Kiran, I'm willing to become your maid." Lindsay clung to him and wailed. Chapter 398. Kiran was dazed. What was wrong with her? Had she really gotten addicted? Was this all because of a silver needle? He had no idea how to explain the situation, not to mention how to solve it. "Kiran, take me, please take me." Lindsay was no longer haughty and arrogant. Gone was the imperious Miss Ludwig, and in her place was a rose waiting for love, a meek woman yearning for a man's affection. If anyone saw her right now, they would not believe their eyes. How could a self-assertive woman like Lindsay choose to submit to a man and even willingly offer herself as a maid? No one could have ever imagined her forgoing her dignity to beg for his love. However, not only was she doing exactly that, but she was also attempting to wrap her legs around Kiran. She was burning with desire and urgency. The sensation brought by Kiran's silver needle was like an addictive poison. Thud. Kiran could feel the heat radiating off her and knew that she was losing her mind, so he struck her on her body. Lindsay's body went numb. The world spun before her, and then she passed out. Kiran scooped her into his arms and entered the bedroom. He laid her on the bed and pulled the blankets over her. When he came out, he found he was drenched in sweat. He glanced over his shoulder at the bedroom in bewilderment. He was starting to doubt if what he had done was right. Why had it turned out like this? While this result had come as a surprise to him, he was still full of expectations for Lindsay. He still hoped she could open a door for him to Power Hub Investment Group. When he retraced his steps to Yvonne's room, the receptionist had already returned with the medicines. He immediately got to work with the receptionist's assistance. However, the latter kept glancing at Yvonne in the bedroom, wondering if the CEO was going to die. With an injury like that, could she rely on these herbs without going to the hospital? It sounded absurd to her, but she did not dare to make any comment. After Kiran had sorted the medicines, he ground the ones for external use into powder, then walked into the bedroom to apply it to Yvonne's wound. Although her attempt at suicide had failed, she had lost a lot of blood, which made her already pale face even more ashen. She looked no different from a dead person. Wearily, Kiran raised his hand and sprinkled the medicine on her wound. Despite her coma, she could not help furrowing her brow. A look of pain appeared on her face, and her whole body began to spasm. Kiran began to gently apply the medicinal powder to her wound. The blood seeping out began to coagulate right in front of their eyes, like a liquid gradually solidifying. However, when he touched her cold body, he felt uncomfortable, nauseous even. He was perplexed. After treating the wound, he removed the silver needle that stopped the bleeding and left to prepare the liquid medicine. 2 hours later, he gave the medicine to Yvonne. Once he had confirmed that her condition was stable, he instructed the receptionist to care for her and left Bayville Hotel. This visit had been exhausting for him. First, there was Lindsay, who had become a crazed pleasure addict. Then, there was Yvonne, who had risked her life to stop him like a fool. As soon as he got into his car, he received a call from Snow. His spirits immediately lifted and he accepted the call with a tap. "Hello, darling. Honey, I'm still in the office. Are you going to pick me up?" Snow's tone was brimming with happiness and expectation. "Wait for me." Stifling his conflicting emotions, Kiran replied. "Okay," Snow answered joyfully. Kiran started his car and got ready to leave. Buzz. His phone vibrated again and he furrowed his brow. The call was from Lilian. Because of the harp, he had smashed his phone in Snow's office a while ago. Before leaving, Snow had passed her phone to him, so he was currently using her number. What could Lilian possibly want with her? He speculated that they had exchanged contact information during their time together, so he answered the call. "Kiran, are you still at Bayville Hotel?" Lilian's icy voice came from the other end. "How did you know?" Kiran regretted his question right away. The woman was from Foxgate, an expert at obtaining information. Ignoring him, Lilian said coldly, "You're not allowed to touch Dragon's Mount. If you do, I'll beat the crap out of you." "You're crazy!" Kiran was already annoyed enough by Yvonne's suicide attempt. Was this woman seriously threatening to beat him now? "I don't want to waste my breath on you." "I said what I said," Lilian said domineeringly. "Stupid bitch." A snarl escaped Kiran's lips at the thought of the two crazy women he had met just now. "Piss off," Lilian hissed back. "Just you wait." Kiran hung up the phone in a huff, floored the gas pedal, and sped toward Neptune's Cove karaoke. Lilian ended the call, her beautiful face contorted with fury. She was a heartbeat away from hurling her phone at the wall. "Bastard! All he does is stir up trouble." Her tone was fraught with mixed emotions. "Knock, knock." There was a knock on the door of her room. "Come in," Lilian called out. Lauren entered. "Boss, Panther Gates members have returned. They're planning to attack Kiran again. Have they been cured of the poison?" Lilian wanted to know. "Looks like it. Simon's energetic, but he's absolutely livid. Obviously, because he was poisoned," Lauren explained. "Well, who else can he blame but his useless organization?" Lilian's tone was dripping with contempt. "What do we need to do?" Lauren asked. "I don't care. If they want to die, they can go ahead." "Yes, boss." With a short reply of agreement, Lauren turned and left to avoid aggravating her further. Lilian glowered. "Since you're so goddamn free, Kiran, I'll give you something to do. Let's see how Simon West bites you." She hoped that Simon could distract Kiran from developing Dragon's Mount. The thought of Dragon's Mount made her feel like tearing her hair out. Kiran could be such a stubborn donkey sometimes. "I can't believe a prick like him exists." "Is Snow blind?" Lilian muttered under her breath. "You are the one who's blind!" Kiran's furious voice came from the doorway. "What are you doing here? Get out!" Lilian flung her arm out in attack. Kiran stalked in her direction without attempting to dodge. Lilian was maddened by his blatant disregard for her attack. Determined to teach him a lesson this time, she withdrew her arm. "Come with me." Before waiting for his reply, she strutted downstairs. Kiran had no idea where she was going, but he wanted to have a proper conversation with her as well, so he nodded. They went downstairs, and Lilian got into Kiran's car. He started the engine, called Snow, and told her he would pick her up later, then drove toward Dragon's Mount. The concern in his voice when he spoke to Snow made Lilian uncomfortable. She suddenly had an impulse to teach him a hard lesson on the dignity of his original betrothed. Chapter 399. On the edge of the York family's ruins on Dragon's Mount, Kiran stopped the car and got out. Lilian remained calmly seated in the passenger seat. Kiran ignored her as he shifted his gaze to the ruins, his eyes unfathomable and filled with deep hatred. The York family's demise was still shrouded in mystery. He wanted to kill all the people involved so that his family could rest in peace as soon as possible. After 3 whole minutes, Lilian still had not come out. He frowned in her direction and asked impatiently, "Well, aren't you getting out?" Lilian sat there in silence as if she had not heard him at all. Seething, Kiran strode over and knocked on the car window, signaling to her to come out. She glared at him but continued to stay in her seat, ignoring him pointedly. Kiran's rage boiled over and he flung the door open. "Get out!" Lilian sat perfectly still, as if her bottom was glued to the seat. Kiran scowled at her in exasperation. Her skin was white as snow, and she was dressed in a white gauze dress. Even though there was no light shining on her, her body seemed to emit a brilliance of its own. Her stunning countenance, fair neck, and exposed legs were dazzling. She was like a fairy who had fallen from the moon into the mortal world. Despite Kiran's annoyance, he had to admit that no words were enough to describe her ethereal radiance. He was certain that men would immediately surrender to her gorgeousness upon encountering her. Of course he would not be one of them. Snow was the one he loved. When he had broken off his engagement with Lilian, he had cut off all ties with her. Lilian was unfazed by his gaze, but she sneered inwardly. So, this jerk knew how to appreciate her beauty too, huh? However, her anger swelled when he resumed his composure. She was his original betrothed, but he only turned his nose up at her. Was Snow really the only one who could catch his eye? Blasted prick. Lilian's fury surged with the arrogance. She decided to make it clear to him that she was the one who turned her nose up at him. She stretched out a creamy leg and placed it slowly on the ground, exuding an elegance just alluring enough to catch Kiran's eye. Sure enough, Kiran's eyes lit up for a second, before reverting to their usual calmness. Lilian's temper flared again. She was wearing a lightweight dress that highlighted her glowing skin, grace, and distinguished aura. However, Kiran seemed unmoved in the face of her breathtaking loveliness. Was Snow truly the only one for him? Her resentment continued to soar. She emerged from the car, bringing her entire figure into Kiran's view. Her white dress was ruched at the ribs, giving her a full shape. It outlined her slender waist and even accentuated the roundness of her butt, displaying all aspects of her feminine charm. The silent night, cool breeze, and lovely woman formed a perfect picture. Dragon's Mount was surrounded by rolling green hills and home to towering ancient trees, strange caves, and deep valleys. It was like a hidden treasure land that possessed the potential to nurture great heroes. Summer was when the hills and forest were lush. The darkness of night brought tranquility and lightness to the place. However, when Lilian stepped out of the car, her beauty provided the finishing touch to the picture. She was like a hibiscus flower, elegant and dignified. Her presence seemed to still the air. As Kiran gazed at her, he could not deny that she gave off a charm distinct from Snow's. Snow looked aloof on the outside, but in front of him, she was adorable and full of personality. Lilian was different. She stood out immediately in a crowd, and her presence had the power to hush or stop all the noise around her. The saying that a woman's beauty could shake the world was definitely coined for a woman like her. Nevertheless, Kiran believed that a woman who was sometimes lovable, sometimes cold, and other times proud like Snow, was a man's ideal partner. Lilian was nothing but eye candy. In fact, he considered digging a pool on Dragon's Mount and placing her in it so she could be admired like a flower. That probably suited her better. The thought prompted the corners of his mouth to curve in amusement and expectation. Lilian was sharp enough to perceive the slight change in his mood. Her pretty face scrunched up sullenly, and a glacial smile appeared on her lips. Kiran reacted to her expression with equal contempt. She shot him a look. "What goes through your mind when you look at these ruins?" "Murder," he answered without hesitation. "And? Murder every single enemy. That's it? The rest is none of your business." Kiran was irked by her high and mighty attitude. "Is that all?" Lilian raised her voice in dissatisfaction. "I said it's none of your business," Kiran retorted impatiently. Smack! Without warning, Lilian slapped him on the buttocks. Kiran was momentarily stunned. He had failed to foresee her move, and this instantly triggered his fury. "How dare you hit me?" "Is that all?" Lilian demanded, ignoring his question. "None of your business," Kiran repeated angrily. Smack, smack. This time, Lilian spanked him not once but twice, and with greater force even. Kiran was close to flipping his lid. Did she take him for an amateur? He knew very well that there was not that big of a power gap between him and Lilian, so he quickly channeled his energy to strike back at her. All of a sudden, he felt an alarming emptiness in his lower abdomen. It was as if he had been completely drained. His mind went blank, and a cold sweat broke out over his forehead. Pow! Kick! Boof! Lilian lifted her foot and landed 3 kicks on his rear. Kiran was beside himself with rage and humiliation. However, he had no strength to fight back, which agitated him. Chapter 400. To Kiran, this was more humiliating and infuriating than death. Lilian Yanis, what have you done to me? He bellowed. Idiot! Lilian snapped and landed another 2 open-handed strikes on his butt. Can't you see I'm spanking you? Well, why do I feel so weak? Kiran was certain he was not poisoned, but he could not figure out why he had no strength. Isn't it because you keep having nasty thoughts every day? Sniggering, Lilian spun on her heel and walked away. Where are you going? Kiran tried to move, but his legs wobbled like jelly, forcing him to quickly hold onto his car for support. However, his arms were just as weak. He had to lean himself against the car, but his body was like a soft noodle that threatened to slide to the ground at any time. Completely alarmed, he glanced in Lilian's direction and saw her returning with a leaved bamboo. Was she going to beat him with it? What are you trying to do? Kiran demanded angrily, staring at her lovely yet indignant face. Thwack! Without a word, Lilian smacked his butt with the bamboo in her hand. Arrgh! The burning pain forced an agonized howl out of him. The veins on his forehead bulged furiously. A childhood memory of him being beaten by his master for causing mischief during his training surfaced in his mind. After that violent beating, he never slacked off again. However, that was a long time ago. Right now, being walloped by Lilian only filled him with indescribable shame and wild rage, so much so that he was starting to consider murder. Sadly, he was unable to lift a finger, let alone kill anyone. At this moment, his body was no different from a noodle. Lilian continued to whip him wordlessly as if she was addicted. Fortunately, her strikes only landed on the back of his body, from his back to his butt to his legs. She did not use any internal force, only her own strength. Even so, Kiran could hardly stand the pain, especially the humiliation he had to endure. You're a fucking psychopath. He was convinced that she was a sadist. His insult only fueled Lilian's anger, and she exerted more force into her beating. Have you lost your mind? Kiran could not understand her at all. Do you enjoy being spanked, Kiran? She snickered. Like hell I do. When I get back my strength, I'll beat the crap out of you, Kiran growled. Oh, you want to get back at me? Sneering, Lilian dealt 3 more blows to him. I'd like to see you try. For a moment, Kiran thought he would blow up, but he quickly began to calm down. Why do I feel so weak? Why? Lilian fumed at the question and brought the bamboo down on him harder. You moronic piece of trash. You don't even know why, but you still fight and kill like a mindless beast. Do you really think you're invincible? Snap! The more she yelled, the angrier she grew. In the end, the bamboo broke into 2 under her force. She seemed spent as well. A sheen of sweat coated her forehead, but her complexion was abnormally pale. However, Kiran could not see it. His whole body felt like it was on fire. He was dismal and miserable, but he composed himself. Is it because of that darned harp and your petty tricks? Who knows, she replied brusquely. I'll smash that harp once I get back, Kiran taunted. I told you if you smash it, you'll die. When that happens, God knows who might take Snow away and have their way with her. Lilian spat cruelly to prick his dignity. Kiran almost exploded and his eyes blazed with fury. Lilian Yanis, if you don't tell me the reason, You'll what? She interrupted him coldly. I'll make you sleep with me, he blurted out in a fit of rage. Bastard! Lilian had not expected him to say that. How dare he suggest sleeping with her when he had denied her, his original betrothed, broken off their engagement, and done PDA with Snow in front of her. He was simply courting death. Livid, she turned away and retrieved another bamboo. Kiran was speechless and exasperated. Lilian's ruthlessness and madness were far beyond his imagination. Did you become twisted because you couldn't satisfy your thirst and— Whack! Thwack! Lilian lashed him the bamboo in her hand hysterically, roaring all kinds of curses in her heart. How dare he say such a thing to her? Did he really want to die? This time, she could no longer control her wrath. Gah! Kiran's yowls rang out one after another. No matter how hard he tried, he could not muster the slightest bit of strength. Once again, Lilian snapped the bamboo. Her arms were throbbing with soreness. "What else do you have to say now?" she demanded hotly. Kiran's lungs were about to burst and the pain was driving him insane. "Still," he said adamantly, "even if you beat me to death, I will never give in to you. So, get off your high horse, and don't expect me to agree with you." "Bastard! So you want to be stubborn, huh? In that case, I'll strip you naked and film myself beating you, then post it online so everyone can see how pathetic you are." She reached out and grabbed hold of his clothes. "Hey, I'm a man. Don't worry, I don't give a damn about your dick." A chill ran down Kiran's spine, calming him down completely. "Lilian, why can't I touch women other than you?" Lilian's fury dissipated a little at his question, but she contained her emotions and replied icily, "I don't know what you're talking about." She continued to tear at his clothes. "I get it. You want to be my wife." Kiran triggered her deliberately. Lilian seethed. Had he finally remembered that she was his first betrothed? Her face was a mask of cold rage as she proceeded to strip him. This time, Kiran was genuinely terrified for his masculine dignity. He could not bear to lose his dignity as a man. "I surrender,"